Hey, Joe here from Home Studio Corner. I don't like lots of rules when mixing, but this is one that has held true for me, I'd say at least 80 to 90% of the time. And the rule is simply this: less tends to be more. Specifically when it comes to plugins, if I start piling on lots of plugins on a track, chances are I'm moving in the wrong direction, and a simpler solution involving less plugins is probably the best. Now, there are exceptions to every rule. There are times where I use 9 plugins on a track and it's exactly what it needs. But those are few and far between, especially when we're talking about just normal stuff like a lead vocal, just trying to get the EQ and compression right. If I'm down to 5, 6 plugins and I'm not liking it, I need to just scratch it and start over. That's exactly what I did in the session I want to show you today. Here's a bluegrass song that I'm mixing. And the first attempt at mixing the vocal, they're all here in yellow. The first attempt, I put 5 plugins on the track. An EQ, a fat channel. Let me show you all of them. Put an EQ at the beginning, just trying to take care of a bunch of frequencies that were bothering me. It's a lot of EQ. Then a fat channel where I was doing some compression with an 1176 style compressor, and then some more EQ with like an analog style EQ. Then I put a second compressor doing a different style of more smooth, that butter compression I talk about. Then the sibilance was bothering me, so I used a multiband to take care of the sibilance, but then the upper mid-range kind of ringing nasal frequencies were bothering me, so I used this band of the multiband to take care of those. And at that point, the mid-range felt a little bit too hot, so I brought another EQ in to turn it down. Now, there may be situations where this is exactly what the vocal needs. In this situation, it was too much. I got through all of that, still hated the vocal sound. So I decided to scrap it and start over. But instead of deleting all the plugins, I wanted to refer back to what I had done just in case I'd changed my mind. So I duplicated everything to a new track, turned the first track down, and went on to the second one. So here's what the first one sounds like, and then we'll move on to the second one. Okay? Take a listen.
When your battle's finally over and you've taken your last stand.
So it's just not great. There's just a lot of stuff in there that still needs to be fixed. That tells me I've used too many plugins. So moved on to the next one. And the plan of attack here was to go simpler, but I ended up still complicating it too much. And this one I used 4 plugins. First plugin I used was a de-esser. Same thing as before. I was just trying to take care of the sibilance, and then that mid-range was still bothering me, the upper mids. So I used different settings there to try to tame those and make it not sound so harsh. Then that leads me to a fat channel plugin, which had a different EQ. Same compressor, maybe a different EQ will solve our problem. That added some lows. What did I do? Removed the lows, boosted some highs. That was starting to work, sound pretty good. Put another fat channel for a different EQ with more options, removed some more low end, boosted a little low mids, and then I brought in another EQ to deal with some ringing that was happening in the upper mid range. Guess what? I got this far. I didn't love it. Here's what that one sounds like.
When your battle's finally over and you've taken your last stand.
So it's not much different than the first one. Remember the first one? It sounded like this.
When your battle's finally over.
Here's the second one.
When your battle's finally over.
That one has like a more of a mid-range sort of sound going on. So there's still work that needs to be done. I already got 4 plugins on the track. I probably need to start over again. This is pretty common. Now, sometimes I'll nail it on the first try and that feels real good, but a lot of times this is what it takes. And I bet a lot of people don't show this to you. They show you, oh yeah, I'm going to put this plugin on here and oh yeah, it sounds amazing. That doesn't always happen. And if you're like me and that doesn't always happen for you, you're normal. Keep it up. Just start over. It's okay to start over. So the third time, I just had 3 plugins. And like I said before, the first plugin was just a volume control. I just needed a little more volume so I could keep my fader down closer to 0. So I just added 3 dB there. So that's literally nothing. Then I added the fat channel. Now, instead of tons and tons of EQ, I rolled off a lot of low end because it was pretty boomy. And then I used this little 3-band EQ. Took out some 400 and below, took out a little bit of 3K where it was getting a little harsh, and then boosted up above 12K for a little bit of air. Then I added a compressor, and it wasn't working as hard as the other compressor. I had 2 compressors on that first vocal, remember? This one was working a more like sane amount of compression, which you can see if I just hit play. 4 and 5 and 7 dB. So it's still a lot of compression, but there's only 1 versus the 2 I had before. And then I had a multi-band compressor. And this one is only doing, although there's 3 bands, the bottom 2 bands aren't doing anything. I'm just using the top band as a de-esser, just to take care of that sibilance that's a little too loud and those upper frequencies on her voice. And that's it. 3-band EQ, 1 compressor, 1 multi-band, and a little bit of volume at the beginning. And it sounds, and all of these have the same reverb on them, and it sounds so much better than the others.
When your battle's finally over and you've taken your last stand.
It sounds natural, it sounds full, it sounds like I would want it to sound. It's a little more like Alison Krauss and less like garbage like I had before. So just for fun, let's go through all 3. I'll click through the first one, then I'll stop and do the second one, then I'll stop and do the third one, and listen to how it improves. Less plugins, better sound. Here we go.
When your battle's finally over. When your battle's finally over. When your battle's finally over and you've taken your last stand.
It's like we added some depth to the vocal that was missing in the other 2. The other 2 had like mid-range and they had the upper frequencies, but it just sounded like cheap. This one added in some of that depth that we needed and dropped into the mix. It sounds good too.
When your battle's finally over.
So, case in point, use less plugins. It might do the job for you. That doesn't mean you can't use more plugins. You can, but I've found in my experience, too many plugins, too many problems. Simplify it down and you might find your mixes sound way better. By the way, if you need help with mixing and developing a process to kind of get you through the process faster and have better results, check out my 5-step mix guide at 5stepmix.com. It's absolutely free. It'll help you get better mixes. See you around.
When your battle's finally